What I'd like to start out today is to give you all a little bit of an overview of what ARM's role in the regenerative medicine sector is and some of the key activities we have underway to try to advance the sector overall. So I think many of you are familiar with the Alliance, but for those who are not, we are an international advocacy organization dedicated to realizing the promise of safe and effective regenerative medicines for patients around the world. We have 300 members, a little more than 300 members. Those are mostly corporate members, about 75% corporate members, 25% nonprofit members, research organizations, patient advocacy groups, and the like. That multi-stakeholder nature of the Alliance is important, particularly when we talk to policymakers about the views of the community. The priorities of the Alliance have remained pretty consistent over a number of years. They are to try to establish clear, predictable, and harmonized regulatory pathways for the sector, enabling market access and value-based reimbursement policies, addressing industrialization and manufacturing hurdles, and conducting key stakeholder outreach and communication. And lastly, we focus on facilitating sustainable access to capital, which is where some of the financing data that I talked about yesterday comes from, part of that work. So regenerative medicine means different things to different people. To us, this is what it means: gene therapies, cell therapies, and tissue-engineered products intended to augment, repair, replace, or regenerate organs, tissues, cells, genes, and metabolic processes in the body, and which aims to alter the current practice of medicine by treating the root causes of disease and disorders. So, to give you some indication of ARM's work and the results of that work, here are some things we're proud of that we've accomplished lately on your behalf. One, ARM was really the lead organization involved in creating the RMAT designation at the FDA, which, as many of you know, is an expedited pathway for regenerative medicines and advanced therapies at the FDA. Once that designation was passed into law through legislation in front of Congress, there was an outstanding issue about whether RMAT would include gene therapies. And ARM advocated on behalf of the inclusion of gene therapies, and there was a successful result to that effort, with the FDA formally announcing it would include gene therapies in the RMAT designation. You may have seen recently that the NIH announced that it was proposing to streamline the review of gene therapy trials. This has been something that ARM has talked to NIH about over quite a long period of time, feeling that the RAC review of gene therapy trials was burdensome to sponsors and not adding a lot of value to the system, and we're delighted that the NIH has come to the same conclusion. And then lastly, I'll just mention that the team in Europe, the ARM team in Europe, spent a lot of time crystallizing the challenges of GMO-related clinical trials in Europe and the various disparate requirements imposed on such trials in Europe. We pulled together a white paper, set of recommendations, got a number of other groups to endorse those, and that has led to a whole series of activities now with the EC where they're really attempting to address all of the challenges that we raised in the course of that work. So we're really pleased about that, although there's definitely more work to be done. So in the current landscape, I'd say it's an amazing and wonderful time to be focused on the policy environment for regenerative medicines. This chart I'm showing, I will not go through in detail, but is meant to illustrate to you the amount of formal policy input that regulators in the United States and Europe and policymakers on both sides of the ocean are seeking. And part of the role of ARM is to distill a point of view of the regenerative medicine sector through conversations with our members and drafting with the input of members, and then to submit it to policymakers. And in so doing, ARM has very much become the formal policy voice of the sector. So I'll show you here a couple of, you can see this is just over the course of the summer. We've submitted a number of comments to CMS, to EMA, and the like. You can see on this chart, here's sort of other work. We have, I think, 6 more formal comments in draft form that will be submitted before the end of the year. And all of these are available to ARM members, right? So these are the full list and more detail about these comments. What are the issues that we've raised or the challenges that we've elucidated? It's all available for members to see kind of what the point of view is that we're expressing on your behalf for these policymakers. So just to talk a little bit more about then our work going forward, it's our view that the market access challenge is sort of the preeminent challenge we're facing now as a community. You know, these therapies are different in type from traditional medicines that public and private payers are used to, and they need some special policy considerations going forward. So ARM has done a couple of things to get ready for this. You may be aware that we published a 3-part series, 3 publications, explaining why advanced therapies do present new payment challenges for public and private payers, and what the particular aspects of those challenges are, and what some potential solutions are. So the 3rd of those white papers was published just a little bit earlier this summer, and this picture on the chart is one of the figures drawn from those publications. That work really has helped us educate policymakers and the public and the media about some of the special considerations of these therapies. We also did a detailed legal analysis of what exactly the U.S. public payers, Medicare and Medicaid, can do, what changes can they make under their current authorities, and what changes need legislative fixes. And we made that publicly available both to the agency and to our members and others. That work is leading us to concentrate very hard this year and next year on working with CMS and the Hill and others to enable these novel value-based payment models. So, and when I say that, what I really mean is a lot of the companies involved now in commercializing therapies in our space are interested in establishing payment over time systems and payment per performance arrangements. And the system is generally, I would say at a high level, there's a lot of enthusiasm for both of those things and support and appreciation that companies are willing to enter into particularly pay for performance arrangements. But there's a real kind of regulatory underbrush that makes those things difficult. And our focus this year is on trying to clear out that underbrush, to give CMS the ability and the freedom to operate and to enter into those kind of arrangements. For those of you who are in this world, you'll know there's different details depending upon whether you're in an inpatient setting or an outpatient setting. So I won't go into all that, but just to say that we're really deeply involved in speaking to decision makers and trying to influence the environment for you all along those 2 lines. I also want to let you know that in Europe, we've embarked on a pretty significant project to articulate the barriers to market access for ATMPs in Europe, both as a way to kind of compare key country markets in Europe to one another, as well as to identify what are the couple of things we could really, that would really change the environment for the better for this community in Europe if we could accomplish a legislative or regulatory fix there. So that work will produce a report. We have a communications plan around that report. We've brought together a whole series of experts in Europe to sort of be the validators of these recommendations, and we will convert that into an advocacy strategy for next year. On the regulatory side of things, you know, that chart I showed a second ago reveals that we're engaged with the regulatory authorities on a whole wide variety of topics, and we will continue to do that. But what I really wanted to highlight for you today is I think right now there's a real concentrated amount of work going on around the CMC aspects of the regulatory environment, right? The approval pathways in many markets are pretty good these days and are working reasonably well. But the regulatory requirements for manufacturing, for comparability, for those kind of things are less well adapted to cell and gene therapy and the particular aspects of cell and gene therapy manufacture, and the fact that there is an expedited approval pathway, and therefore that there's likely to be a fair bit of change in the manufacturing process. So what I've listed here on this slide is just a set of again, those formal conversations we're having with the agency that relate to CMC regulatory issues. And we'll continue to focus on that quite heavily in 2019, again, in the US and in Europe. On the science and technology front, we have a science and technology committee at ARM that many of you may participate in. That group held a workshop last year, and out of that workshop felt that one piece of value we could deliver for the community is by developing a case study-based white paper to assist in those involved in the development of gene and cell therapies. And the model for this work is something called the AMAB project that the monoclonal antibody community embarked on 15 years ago to create something similar when they were at a similar state of development and manufacturing challenges. So what this is basically 20 organizations, and if you would like to participate in this and are not currently involved, the door is open to you. But these 20 organizations have come together and developed a framework document defined into chapters covering development, manufacture, regulatory submission, and life cycle issues. Different companies have taken different chapters, and the plan is to have this be a living document, but one which is initially published in 2019. We've started with a gene, as you can see on this chart, but we intend and have begun the initial planning for the A-cell project as well. So in other developments at ARM, those of you who were here yesterday may have heard me talk a little bit about this. We have, of course, been sponsoring the meeting on the Mesa now for 8 years and are really pleased with the role it plays in the community. And we're going to extend that idea to Europe, and we're launching in 2019 a meeting we call the Meeting on the Med. It will be in a beautiful location in Barcelona, and we'll have a similar flavor and character to this meeting. So we'll have company presentations, panel discussions, partnering opportunities, and the like. We think it'll be a terrific opportunity to bring together the cell and gene therapy community in Europe, along with their international collaborators and partners. So you'll be getting more information about this, but I encourage you to save the date, and we already have a commitment from the Director General of the EMA to give the keynote talk there, and the program's coming together very, very well. Lastly, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of some of the ARM communication activities that are available for you. These take two main forms. One is we do a sector newsletter. This is available to everybody, which covers weekly. This used to be, I think, monthly, and then every 2 weeks, and now there's so much news in the sector. There's a weekly review of commercial, clinical, policy developments in the sector. Anybody can sign up for that. We currently have about 12,000 people on the distribution. And then we have an e-briefing, a monthly e-briefing that's specifically for members, and that talks a little bit more about what ARM is doing, some of this advocacy work that I mentioned. It provides links to specific documents and tools that we've put together, lets you know about events that you may want to participate in, what the activity of the ARM committees is, and the like. So if you're an ARM member and at all interested in keeping track of what we're doing, I really encourage you to sign up for that. So thank you very much. If you have further questions or comments, interests in things for the Alliance, this is the website here. Perla Corridor, whose email here, is our Director of Business Development and Member Activities, and she can help you navigate ARM in any way you want, as can, of course, any of the rest of us who are here today. So with that, let me, let me introduce the next panel. We'd like to kick off the day with a conversation. One of the big dynamics, of course, that's happened in our sector, particularly over the last year, is the growing interest of big pharma and large biotech in this sector. We've seen a lot of M&A activity and other activity undertaken, and so we'll have a panel discussion to describe that. And with that, is Kay here? I'll invite him to the stage. Come on up.